So I'm going to go ahead and give the COVID news and updates, and then we're going to turn it over to Marcelo because he has obviously some nice research, interesting research he's going to show us on COVID. And this is Marcelo. I'm going to introduce him towards the end, but right now he's an associate professor at Campinas, University of Campinas, which Pedro had introduced me to him when I was down there, and I had the pleasure of meeting him a couple of times in different meetings, and he's doing some really interesting work, and I think you guys might be interested in it. So, okay, I'm going to fly through this quick. So, as I said, to give people enough time to listen to Marcelo speak. So, one thing I always bring up is we're trying for an in-person meeting in maybe 2023, but we need to find funders to help us fund this meeting. So keep that in mind. Just the COVID news. These are some papers that have come out that you have seen. This paper actually came out last Friday, after our meeting. It's our COVID exposure assessment tool, which was the mastermind of Brian Schmoller, and covert effort from Nydia Trivao and Sam Duta and other folks and me. And I think it's a nice paper, but I'm biased. But it came out last week, so if you wanted to take a look and read it, it's there. Just some other really quick updates, and I'm going to go into the COVID news. Al, as I mentioned few weeks ago, Al's starting the monkeypox subgroup. Anyone who wants to work on that, get in touch with me or Al. He's also was interested in the case report kind of study on long COVID, which he has some interesting patients that he's trying to get consented to see if he could do this case study. So anyone want to help him, again, reach out to him or me. Again, I threatened about the long COVID subgroup. I'm going to start it soon. And if you remember a few meetings ago, Marshall Porterfield suggested we make these updates available to the public on YouTube. And now with Marshall Porterfield's student Alex, we're able to set this up. So tell people who are interested, the public, to look at it. And, so it'll be on this YouTube, and we have it on our COVID site too. This little tab here, weekly COVID updates, so people can look at these updates and see that. So it's being recorded for that purpose too. So if people wanted to make some comments outside of that, keep that in mind. This is recorded for the public. All right, so we'll go in the COVID news quickly. So as you probably know, there's the new bivalent vaccine coming out, and some nice articles here talking about that. At least in the U.S. and I think globally, it's the same thing. Where even though we have this new bivalent vaccine and the boosters coming out, there's not that many people that are actually taking it, and this is worrying stuff for, of course, our scientific community because we know about all the this next upcoming wave coming, as we see in these articles here. These bivalent boosters can reduce severe infection, and as people predict in this article, in this Pew article here, that you could probably prevent 90,000 deaths over the next year. But people, I guess, need to pay attention to that. And again, this kind of leads into the fact that we know, based on what's happening in Europe and UK, seeing the start of the new wave, US is going to follow soon, and then usually it's the UK, Europe, US, and then South America, and then other parts of the world. So that's going to be happening, what people are predicting soon. And again, this is the UK and Europe, talking about the 1.3 million positive tests that are happening around Europe now. And then there's the other issue about the twindemic, talking about the influenza virus, since people have now given up, protocols of safety and masking. That's the other concern too, not only coronavirus, but also influenza causing a twindemic coming up this winter time. So that's what's people are concerned about, and at least the scientists like us are, and we all know about it, but the public might not be aware of it. So some just recent papers too that might be of interest. Some better news, I should say, not the gloom and doom, but this is paper. I'm sure everyone here is convinced of this, but this paper came out last week about how a nice study about the boosters in these 3 different vaccines and how well it does to reduce hospitalization. I mean, again, it's probably no surprise to anyone here, but again, for the public, I think this is really great because their study group, I mean, they showed obviously if you're immunocompromised, you're still going to have the highest chance of deaths, even with the boosters, but the percentage is a lot lower than being unvaccinated. So it does reduce it tremendously. And it's probably one of the first papers I've seen to really quantify that for the boosters nicely. Again, they're saying it doesn't prevent you from getting sick, but it prevents you from getting hospitalized in severe infection or dying. This is another interesting paper that came out. I thought people might be interested in reading. It's talking about Paxlovid, and you know about the Paxlovid rebound. So, this study, I think is what they're saying is the rebound's not because of, let's say, immune deficiencies or not. And this is kind of, you read this here, but what they show in this paper, really briefly, in a big overview, is that they actually, people who are having this rebound have a big T cell response, which I found surprising. I didn't know that at all. And this basically in the red is like, the findings suggest that the rebound symptoms are partially due to like a robust cellular immune response due to the residual RNA that's left over. And then this is kind of impacting your impaired immune response, and then bioreplication occurs and so on. And this is some of the, that's the theory that they have.
Steve, quickly, where are they getting? These are from PBM. What they isolate?
Yeah, so they got PBMCs. Yeah, they got PBMCs from patients. And then they looked at the T cell population. Yeah, from there. And T cell populations, and then different population of T cells too.
Thanks.
Yeah. So they categorize too, the patient's acute, and then the rebound, and then late phase, And you can see like the antibody response doesn't change, which is pretty neat to see, I guess, for that part of it. And the rebounds with the Paxlovid treatment, that's what they're talking about. But you can see how the T cell response is a lot higher now, which is pretty interesting to see with the Paxlovid, when they rebound. But it's an interesting paper. Again, I will share these slides with everyone. So I know the rebound issue has been a head scratcher for a lot of people, but this might start leading to some indications of what's happening for the science and the biology. Variants to watch. Last week I talked about 2.7.25, also known as BF.7. And we know BA.4.6 is still rising, but this new one you might have heard about this past week, BQ.1.1. It's a subvariant or a evolutionary variant of BA.5. It's still very low, but what the concern is, this one they're saying has even, every new variant that comes up, everyone says that it has even more immune evasion properties. There's always a concerning every time you hear about that. But this one, they say, well, potentially the bivalent boosters of vaccines probably should hold up against this one. But it doesn't mean you're not going to it's not going to stop the infection, again, as we common theme. But this is one to watch. Still very low, starting in Canada. But, people this is one of the, I guess, the variants to watch. Not necessarily a concern yet, but to watch. And I think they saw this already in the UK, a small percentage. And this is like some other scientists on Twitter talking about it, trying to quantify, because no papers really on this now. It's just people, community posting their data, and you can see, like the growth rate advantage this actually has over the other ones. That's why they're concerned, because the growth rate is, comparing to all these other variants, it's doubling at a rate that's a lot higher, and that's what they're mainly concerned about. And due to this other properties and mutations that are on the spike and other things that could help it evade the immune system, and the antibodies is a concern, but it's still very low. So I'm going to skip over that one, but then also go to the recent long COVID news. Sorry, I'm going over this quick to give Marcelo enough time to speak.
Totally quick question. I ask every week in the UK and or here. 4.6 continues to slip up, but do they know whether that's the driver of this uptick or this surge to come, or not yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so it's BA.5 still prominent, but BA.4.6. I'll show you and they think the driver is not. They don't know. Like they don't say it's BA.4 or BA.5, but they say combination. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. But mainly they're saying the driver is the lower, everyone lowering their guard is the driver. And that's what they're saying, right? But they're not blaming it on one variant or the other yet. So I guess we'll find out. Yeah. So then the long COVID, as we know, is a huge issue. And CDC actually put out this nice little page here now talking further about long COVID, and at least in the U.S., characterizing the prevalence of long COVID around the U.S. And then you can look at here, the percentages, like the South here is a lot more. But this article came out talking about, saying about 4 out of 5 people with long COVID have, trouble performing daily activities, and that's a nice little news article bringing awareness of that fact. Another one from this Harvard news article talking about, numbers about 23 million people approximately thinking having long COVID, and what the impact is. And also the UK article here. But overall, I think this is kind of good for the public to know that, long COVID is not it's primarily in the younger population, like 18 to 29 to like 50, that they're being impacted. And of course, the older people are getting impacted, but it's just because you're young and healthy doesn't mean you're going to be avoiding long COVID if you get sick. That's one of the main driving points of these news articles. There's one interesting paper that came out here on BMJ that was, I think, last week, or was it published actually in July, but then I didn't actually notice it until now. But they're talking about two symptoms that are down. Oop, I think there's a strange echo. If someone could mute their mic, that would be good. They're talking about two symptoms that are emerging to be dominant, and maybe not a surprise for a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of symptoms we associate with long COVID, but smell and taste and the long-lasting effects of it is actually a concerning one. And actually, one of my friends recently, just oddly enough today, messaged me and asking about her mother-in-law. Since May, has lost her sense of smell and taste. So this is a concern. They didn't know how prominent it is. I don't think the public is really aware of this. But you can see that they're claiming this paper that after 180 days, a lot of times the smell and taste will recover. But there's, of course, like a 20%, I think, what did they say, 20 or 30% that don't. And then once they don't, those people tend to recover even slower and slower over time. But this was interesting to read. And this article was talking about I'll go here, there are all kind of support groups for people like that. I'm not endorsing one support group over others, but these ones have supposed suggestions to do, like, I guess, sort of physical therapy for your olfactory bulb to maybe help improve, the smell and training over time. So not that I would endorse any of this stuff, but, actually for people to look at, there might be something there, and might not. And of course, Survivor is always a good resource. Yeah.
Option real quickly, this is Kevin Clark. Have you seen any reports about specific impairments regarding to odorants or specific molecules, food molecules?
No.
So, for example,
I'm sure they're out there. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there are specific types of odorants that might be impaired more than others.
No, I think it's across the board generally. And like for people that just have a tiny bit of residual malfunction left, yeah, you get some weird selectivity patterns that come up. And
that's seen with recovery as well then?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah. And this is a PNS paper that came out a month ago that's actually talking, again, going to the, I'm sure people have heard a lot of and read about treatments that people are trying. And I'm always cautious about long COVID treatments, as probably a lot of you are, because as this article points out, many of them are not proven. So, but there's probably one of them that is correct out there. We just need to get more funding and do the research needed for that. That's my push here. Here's an interesting paper, preprint, that I just read this morning, came out last week, which is a very interesting theory talking about long COVID and potentially long COVID can be an imprint left behind of this common cold coronavirus that probably all of us have gotten at one point in our life or many times. And they're saying that what they saw in this paper, again, it's a preprint, going under peer reviews, take it as it is. But and this is they looked at this is what they looked at: 43 patients that are arthritic or with arthritis, and what they looked at is they saw that there's after people are getting long COVID, there's an overwhelming antibody response to this other coronavirus, common cold one, which is pretty interesting to see. So then they're claiming that maybe it's basically a chronic inflammation or immune going array trying to combat this other coronavirus that's not in your that's the imprint is there, but it's not active. So that's what their basic overview claim is. So I don't know if anyone's read this paper in depth. I kind of just skimmed it, but it's an interesting theory to see and I guess when it publishes after peer review, we'll see more about it. But could be another clue of what's happening with long COVID for some people. And then this is the COVID dashboard. That's really nice. I think long COVID one that people set up. But this is just going over now the variant distribution and the cases and trends. And you see BA 4.6 in the U.S. starting to pop out more and more clusters. So to Steve's question earlier, this is maybe going to be driving it soon. Maybe the new surge as it takes over could be soon, but right now it's not coming. The wastewater, if you look at nationally, it's going down. But this is what I said last week. If you look at certain regions, like where I'm at, Middlesex, you see the spike happening. So Northeast is starting to see the bigger spike in the U.S. And same thing with the wastewater CDC showing that. And then, of course, if you want to go up globally, here's a nice one I always bring up, and looking at like Palo Alto in the Bay Area here, you can see certain cities around that area were going down, but Palo Alto, for example, is going back up. And then you can see the different variants they're sequencing. Again, overall, globally in the U.S., looking at the NAT, the nucleic acid application test, it's going down. But again, regionally, looking at all of this charts, it depends. The Northeast is going up. So here's the BA 4.6 that Steve mentioned. You can see how it's slowly creeping up more and more. Where's the BA 4.6 here? Now it's about 10 to 13% of the cases. You can see the Northeast is a lot more. So maybe this is what's driving this slow surge coming up in the Northeast, is maybe partly responsible for that. And the BF.7 is this one, B2.75.2. Still low, but it's rising quicker. And last week we talked about how concerning that would be. You don't see BQ here yet. It's just not really listed in the U.S. BQ.1.1. But globally, it's the same kind of idea. You see like European countries. I'm going to go over this quick, and I'll share the slides with people later. So Portugal is still relatively low. France is like one of the European countries. You can see new cases, hospitalizations going up. And a lot of other countries around France do a similar thing. I'm not going to show that data. But UK, again, you see the rise, new cases. USA, we've already been over. Brazil and South America, since we got our Brazilian speakers here. And you guys are still doing pretty good. Like new cases. Unfortunately, there's no reports from hospitalization patient ICU from Brazil or South American countries. But you can see how it's very low. Japan had that huge spike, but they're bringing it back down, so that's neat. South Korea, same thing. A lot of those Asian countries, they had that huge spike with BA.5, as you see here, in the original Omicron, BA.1, but they're all coming back down. And same with India. India never went back up that much. South Africa is always an interesting thing with the cyclical behavior that I've always pointed out. But so far, they're doing pretty good, so I don't know what's happening there. Australia, same thing as Asian countries. Okay, so that was really quick. Sorry, I went a little longer. I wanted to turn it over to Marcelo.